Welcome to New Possibilities. I have a special guest today, Angel Ramirez-Jordan. He has a very popular YouTube channel. He has Instagram, and also he's on Facebook. I will include links to all of his social media in the description box to this video. So for today, we're going to talk about colorism and Black identity. And we all know about the problem of self-hatred in the Black community, the whole issue of dark skin versus light skin, and just all the negative stigma that has been associated with Black skin, dark skin. We know that many of our people make jokes about people who are dark skinned. We hear the term crispy here on YouTube. We hear people called charcoal and midnight and all those types of things. And just growing up as a kid, I remember that there was a dark-skinned African American in our community, and many people would ridicule him because of his skin color. And people actually make fun of people because of their hair texture or their facial features. So they have features that resemble traditional African features. Then people mock those people because often we have been taught to hate ourselves. While they condemn dark skin, they elevate and celebrate light skin often, unfortunately. You have many people who, at one point, they used to think that light skin was more attractive. They would think that hair that resembled European hair was more beautiful somehow. And we would use terms like good hair and bad hair in the Black community. And often the term good hair was applied more towards people who had hair that resembled white hair or Indian hair or something other than African kinky hair. So this whole phenomenon of dark skin versus light skin has existed in our community for quite some time. And I saw a couple of your videos. You deal with the issue of race and you deal with colorism in some of your videos. And I wanted to talk about it from a different perspective. Often we hear about how dark-skinned African Americans are discriminated against, but rarely do we hear about the experience of light-skinned people. Often people presume that light-skinned African Americans are more privileged than dark-skinned and that they don't face any problems. And I saw one of your recent videos where you talked about this, so I wanted to spend some time just hearing you elaborate on your experience and just your feedback. What do you think about this whole issue of colorism?
Yeah, that's something that I've dealt with quite a lot. I mean, like you said, there are memes all over the place. You know, light skin be like, dark skin be like. There are stereotypes that seem to come from, within our community based on just simply shade, the complexion and your tone of your skin. Now, I mean, when people, there is at the moment, there's like this debate right now with almost this, I think they call it light skin privilege, where they will say, oh, because you're light skinned, you're not going to be murdered by police and you're not going to be harangued by the cops and you're not going to face the same kind of racism that somebody who's dark skinned may face. Now, while to an extent that may be true, because due to, say, when somebody racist sees you, they do see you as a black person, whether you be mixed, biracial, light skin, dark skin, they see you as a black person because you have black in you. Now, they may feel more threatened or have more of a racial hatred towards somebody that's darker skinned than somebody who's light skinned, but they still see you, to excuse my language, as a nigger, right? And you're still going to receive all of those negative connotations. Now, being a light skinned man of, dual nationality, dual culture, I did suffer from not only racism, but also colorism within our own community, where growing up, I just remember growing up and having to fight every day, fighting at school, fighting after school, coming out of the barbershop, having to fight. And my dramas always seem to can't come from like, darker skinned guys. And whether that was, and I kind of didn't know whether that was, as you grow up, you think, was that their insecurity? Was it a problem that they had where they felt, I don't like light-skinned guys because light-skinned guys get all the attention, or light-skinned guys get women, or light-skinned guys are treated better than me, so I don't like them. So because of this, I'm gonna basically, treat them badly. Now, you can only really kind of go like based on your experiences. And I remember having like other, other friends. My cousin is dark skinned, my best friend is brown skinned, he's just slightly lighter than yourself. And my brown skinned friend would always say, no one cares about us. We're in the middle. No one cares. There's this light skin versus dark skin.
Right.
And we're just there plodding along, like nothing's going on. Like, oh well, yeah, I'm brown skinned. I did have a video when I talked about the whole colorism aspect when we talk within our community, when we talk about what is better. You know, growing up in a Jamaican and Puerto Rican household, and when people would find out that, oh, my mother's Puerto Rican, they say, oh, that's where you get your good hair from, or, that's where you get your complexion from, is from your mom, or I'm good looking because of my Puerto Rican side and not my Jamaican side. They're both nationalities, and these are the things that I would hear all the time. I wasn't hearing them from white people. I was hearing this from black people. I was hearing this from people that looked like me or that were darker than me. My grandmother, my Puerto Rican grandmother, used to say stuff like, "Oh, you don't want to go in the sun too long. You don't want to get too dark." Or my dark skinned grandmother, my dad's mom, would have like a similar aspect, and kind of feel, she ended up married. She's a dark skinned woman, and she married a very light skinned Jamaican man, and she always said that she had a more of a preference to a lighter skinned man. I remember growing up, I think there was this, this thought process, or this, I don't know if it was a fashion or a trend, where they used to say, light skinned brothers are in fashion, or mixed guys are in fashion. And, to a certain extent, when I was younger, I used to feel that was the case when I was much younger. I felt that was the case, 16, 18, 19, 20.
Right.
But as I got more older, the same woman that I would approach back in the day would tell me how, oh, no, I'm not really into light-skinned guys anymore. They want chocolate guys, want a dark-skinned brothers, stuff like that. So things always kind of change. And there is kind of like, I feel sometimes there are people that do follow like a trend or a fashion or what is deemed as acceptable. And right now we do see that in society or in the media, even though there is a lot of light-skinned women and light-skinned men portrayed in fashion magazines and media. There is now this huge push with dark-skinned models and dark-skinned men. Dark skin is beautiful, etc., etc. We're probably one of the very few people that have this separation based on the color of, or the texture of our hair or the shade of our skin. So even though I know that in India they have this whole thing where, like the darker Indians versus the lighter ones, they don't necessarily have like, it's not necessarily the same as how it is in our community, but we almost act as if it's a completely different race, as if light skin and dark skin are two totally different races. I know I've been talking for a minute, but there's a comment on my YouTube channel, and it's based on, that same thing. And somebody said, us light skinned folks need to create our own race.
Wow.
Like, this is ridiculous. You have this in South Africa. In South Africa, unless you're dark skinned, you're not black. So you have to be very dark to be black. If you're my complexion, in South Africa, they call you colored. So they have colored versus black versus white. So what you need to understand is, if we don't unify, we will almost go into this almost South African kind of like dimension. Exactly. If you watch any documentaries about South Africa, you have right now you've got the lighter skinned black folks who call themselves coloreds, who are basically saying that they're basically the lowest of the low right now. During the apartheid era, the whites were the highest, and then it was the colored, and then the blacks were at the bottom. So light skin and then the dark skin. And now that the Black Party are in power, it goes the dark skin South Africans, the white folks, and now the coloreds. So within that colored spectrum, they've got biracial, mixed, light skin. When you think to yourself, and from us as an outsider, or us from in the Western world, to look at this and think, but you're all black? Like, you're black. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, I just think all those categories just undermine us as a people. If we divide ourselves up into different groups and all that kind of stuff, at the end of the day, we end up weaker as a people. And, the white dominant society gets even more powerful and more dominant as long as we're divided up into these subcategories. And regardless of the fact of what complexion we are, we're still, as you said, basically treated like the N word, treated with disrespect, still discriminated against, still subject to police brutality, employment discrimination, and just overall oppression in a white man's world.
Yeah.
And the thing that you said about these other groups of people where they still have color issues, like you mentioned India. Yeah, I mean, all over the world, we see a phenomenon where they actually sell bleaching products in India, in Africa. And you would think, like in the motherland, where Africa, you have black people, you have positive images of black people regularly. You would think that people would have self-love there. But because of the legacy of colonialism, you see that even in Africa and the Caribbean, you see people using these skin bleaching products. Because, I mean, even there, they have self-hatred issues.
It's
just something.
You know what it is? Okay, it's this. There is this European standard of beauty. And where the European standard of beauty is in the face of America, in the face of Europe, in the face of the United Kingdom, in the face of the Caribbean and the West Indies, we think that it's not going to be in the face of Africa, but it is. Come on, South Africa was colonized by the Dutch. It always grinds my nerves when people say, but there are white Africans. There are no white Africans, all right? If you're a white person living in Africa for the last 200 years, you're not indigenous to Africa. You're indigenous to the Netherlands. You're still Caucasian. You're European. Colonizers have colonized North Africa, West Africa. And you see things in the media. The media is everywhere now, especially with the internet now. People see everything. So you have, some men, let's say, for example, who really, that will put lighter skin on a pedestal. And the same with women that will put lighter skin on a pedestal. So these darker skinned sisters in the motherland see this and want that same attention. And they feel that light skin is a representation of beauty. Different texture, a looser texture curl pattern is a representation of beauty. So what we're doing is we're bringing this westernized European standard of beauty and it's going into the motherland, okay?
Right.
And they're seeing this and think, we want to be accepted, we want to be beautiful. Because so many times before when, you look at a very curvaceous woman, real big butt, thick thighs, big hips, and say, well, you know what? That's a body only a black man can love and appreciate. But now, the westernized European culture has decided, yes, that's beautiful in certain, category, and to a certain extent, certain parts of it. So now everybody wants it. So the same black women that weren't really proud of having curves, that back then, may now be more proud of having curves because it's now socially acceptable. And again, it's the media. There's this whole thing now with like contouring your nose. So you have a lot of sisters that will try to get a more Eurocentric looking nose or more of a slimmer bridge, something kind of more like a straight nose. But if tomorrow we wake up and all over the media, you've got these sisters with more African noses, a wider set nose, and the media and society tell you this is now beautiful. You're going to see how people will want surgery for a broader nose and the thing is, we're so controlled by the media and what the media put out there, we don't even realize it. To what we wear, to what we eat, everything. There's a trend right now for natural hair, right? Is it the trend for natural hair? Is it necessarily because a consciousness, an awakening, a self-love, or is it everyone's doing it? There's this trend.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point because, a while ago I did a video about African American women having natural hair. And I pointed out how I was surprised to see that you have so many African American women that have natural hair, and you would think that that's a symbol of Black pride and that they love themselves. But I found that many of these women that have these natural hairstyles or whatever, many of them, instead of being with a Black man, many of them choose white men over Black men. And some of them actually have a preference for white men. So in doing those videos and hearing feedback from those videos, it just became clear to me that often this natural hairstyle is just that. It's just a
Yeah,
hairstyle.
it's a
It's
hairstyle.
just a trend for the
It's not
moment.
necessarily synonymous with consciousness
Right,
or
exactly.
pro-black, and there's this true meaning of pro-black. To be pro-black is very strict, you know, very strict. Buy black, eat black, teach black, love black. You know, like Dr. Layla Africa said, even your toilet paper's black. Like you have to, you know, it's militant. It's a militancy, and I've tried to explain to a lot of people that say I'm pro-black, you know, but I got a white wife or I got a white husband. I said, no, you're not pro-black. If you can love being black, you love your culture, you love your race, but if you don't love another black person, then you are pro-choice. You're a humanist. You know, you're pro-life, pro-love. All of these things that, you know, and whatever words we can think of. Are you pro-black? No. How I break down pro-black to the point that when you break it down, you question yourself.
Am
Am
I
I
pro-black?
pro-black? Like this is, you know, you think to yourself, am I really pro-black? Because look at some of the real pro-black brothers and sisters through history, to the point where they would never date outside of their race. You know, you've now just to like that leads into the light skin, dark skin thing is this. I had a brother of mine, a dark skin brother, said, you know what I don't like? I don't like how all these pro-black conscious sisters always got a light skin man. You know, they was like, why are you always with a light skinned brother? You know,
Yeah.
and I thought
And I
of
hear that like the flip side of that as well. Like a
yeah,
lot of guys talk all this black power stuff and then,
with a
you
white
know, they have a
woman.
white woman
Yeah.
or they have
I
a very
mean
light woman.
in terms of the light skin thing, you know, the dark skinned woman with a light skinned brother is this, okay. It's almost a given. So maybe someone will understand, maybe they don't. But here it is. She's pro-black, she's conscious. So she wants a man who's conscious. She wants a man who's pro-black, who's done his journey, this, you know, introspection within himself and found himself and, you know, truly understands who he is. And it just so happens to be, it's not the fact that she's going directly looking for a light-skinned brother. It just happens to be that this lighter-skinned black male has had to do that battle. He's literally had to do a more of an introspection, more of a battle, because sometimes people told him he's not black. Sometimes people told him he's not, because we have the purists, you know, unless you're dark skinned, you ain't black, my brother. You know what I'm saying? So things like that.
Yeah, and I noticed, like, to bring it up, I mean, a lot of people say that about you on YouTube. They have
Yeah.
all these special names for you.
Yeah, of course.
And, you know, so I want to hear, like, I mean, I know you've done, like, videos.
Yeah, I've
dealing
done a
with
video
this,
on
you
it.
know,
I
and
mean,
called you
like
Rachel
just
Dolezal and
yeah, of course. I
Malcolm
mean,
Mexican and all
I'll
that
go
stuff.
into that. I mean, like, but just with the light skin thing, it's just like, all right, the man that she's with is pro-black. He's conscious, and it just so happens to be that this light skinned brother just happens to be very conscious, and she's gone with that. You look at light skinned brothers like Malcolm X, Huey P. Newton. You know, they're very pro-black brothers. These are military minds, military men. Now, with me, the problem with me is that, okay, there's trolls. You have to understand trolls versus real people, versus people that truly understand. We have a lack of education. Rosa Clemente. So Rosa Clemente is a black Puerto Rican activist. I'm sure you know who she is. You can see me right now. She's lighter than myself, all right? Her hair is much straighter than mine, and she will tell you she is black. She tells you her ancestors are from Africa. Her roots are from Africa. She's from the motherland. If it wasn't for Africa, there would be no her. She tells you straight off the bat, she accepts her Taino bloodline. She accepts her African bloodline. She, however, does not accept the colonizers, the rapists, the murderers. Any woman, God forbid, that has been a victim of rape will not raise her child, under the same guise as the rapist. She's not going to tell them about the rapist, who the rapist was. You know what? If the rapist was white, that child is black because the mother is black. And this is kind of how Rosa Clemente sees it. Now, for me, I am a product of intercultural relationship, internationality relationships, right? Both my parents are from the same geographical area. They're both from the Caribbean. They're both from the West Indies. The islands are very close to each other. You've got Jamaica here, then you've got, Hispaniola, then Puerto Rico. Then you have all the other small islands, that make up the Caribbean. My father is a light-skinned, a brown-skinned black Jamaican. My mother is a Puerto Rican who is when you look at a Puerto Rican, the average Puerto Rican, they're not white. They're definitely not white. Some of them are very dark. Some of them are your complexion. Some of them are my complexion. Some of them are lighter, but they have African features. This ties into the whole: are they black or are they mixed? You know, now a lot of people will tell you. You look at any of my videos where I say Puerto Ricans are black. People don't really seem to understand the concept of black versus race.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this whole issue of Afro-Latino identity. I mean, because a lot of times you have a lot of Latinos or what's called Hispanics deny that African aspect or that African history.
Who would look like you.
Right, exactly.
They would look like you and say, nah, I'm mixed.
So what has been your experience with that? Like, have you encountered people
Yeah, I mean,
to...
all right, so when I look at somebody who has bigger lips than me, I have kind of a straight Ethiopian kind of nose. They have a broader nose than me, thicker hair than me, darker skin than I have. And you look at this person and think, you're black. And they say, no, I'm not black. I'm Puerto Rican. I'm Dominican. Yeah, that's your nationality. The thing you need to understand is that when you say black, okay, to these so-called Hispanics, they connect black with African American. And there's this negative connotation throughout the world with African Americans. So it's like, I'm not black, I'm Puerto Rican. All right, I understand that you're Puerto Rican, but I'm not African American. Well, I'm not saying that you're African American.
Exactly.
Then when you get those Puerto Ricans that will say, look, we're mixed. We are mixed. We're mixed with black, white, and indigenous Indian. Now, every Puerto Rican, every Dominican somehow has this internal genealogy percentage calculator in their head when they turn around to say, well, we're like 75% white, and then the rest black and indigenous Indian. How do you know this? None of them have taken the genealogy test, but yet sit there with Afro hair and African features, okay? Your average Puerto Rican looks biracial. It's fact, okay? Now, here's the thing. You're mixed. Yes, you're mixed. Are you still black? Yeah. No one is state by calling you black. We're not saying, because if you go on a site, you know, the real definition, you're talking about Negroid, you know, Mongoloid, and Caucasoid. Right? Those are races. The word black is something that civil rights activists fought for. They didn't want to be called Negro. They didn't want to be called colored. They saw it as a spectrum. Whether you were mixed, remember, this was whether you were mixed biracial, yellow, caramel, brown, red, dark skin, with black. This is the spectrum of black. It comes from here to there, right? You had Puerto Rican activists that were fighting for the exact same things. Pedro Albizu Campos, who was this is a black man, right? This is a black, his feature-wise, he looked kind of very similar to me. If they type in Pedro Albizu Campos into Google, he's a light-skinned brother, very similar features to me, had very curly hair. This man thought he was Puerto Rican. As in, I'm just Puerto Rican. He was Puerto Rican. He graduated, he was the first Puerto Rican to graduate with honors from Harvard. He spoke like 4 or 7 different languages, right? He goes to the military, so he has to fight, you know, for America. And he thought, because he had a degree, you know, he spoke all these languages, he's Puerto Rican, you know, and at this time there was segregation, you know? He's going to fight with the white soldiers. When they stuck him in the black barracks and, you know, with all the other black soldiers, he was confused, like, what's going on? Because you don't see yourself as this particular race because you're Puerto Rican, or Dominican, or light skin, or mixed. But society saw you as black. Exactly. So you couldn't drink from the same water fountain. You're fighting for a country that does. And that moment was when he realized, well, we are black. Okay. When you look at the African influences in Puerto Rico, and people love to lessen it and dumb it down. Like, you know, it's not that much. It's really prevalent.
Yeah, and that brings me to another point that I want to talk about, and that's the actor Taye Diggs. Not too long ago, he made statements about his biracial child, and he said that he doesn't want his biracial child to refer to himself as black. You know, he fears that will happen. He wants his son to refer to himself or identify himself as biracial out of respect towards his mother. And I just wanted to think, what do you think about that? Like the idea of someone who's biracial identifying solely as biracial as opposed to black or even as opposed to white?
So I just I walked into this. I was in London, and I walked into this famous West Indian spot on Oxford Street, and there was this light skinned black Jamaican woman, and I wanted to test something, and I was with a friend of mine. I said, "Excuse me, you don't know me from anywhere. What do you think I am?" She said, mixed race, biracial, light skin, you're black. I said, okay. I said, nah, I'm white. She said, what? I said, I'm white. She said, no, you're not white. I said, why am I not white? And she says, your hair, your lips, your skin tone, your features. You've got some black features, you don't look black, but you look part black at least. And I said, okay. I said, all right, let's say, for example, my mother is white and my father is black. She says, okay, what am I? She says, you're mixed race. I said, am I black? She said, yeah. I said, okay, so I'm black, why? She said, because of your features. You have black features that your features resemble more black. Than if you look at my hair, for example, this very round ball of curls is nothing like straight hair, but very similar to a person who has an afro that pulls it back in one. Just may not be as thick or as tightly curled.
Right.
My lips are, full, things like this. She said, because your features resemble more closely to black. And I said, all right, but I want to associate with being white. I mean, I'm half white, right?
Yeah.
So if I can associate with being half, if I can associate with being black because I'm half black, why couldn't I associate with being white because I'm half white? And she said, because you don't look white. I said, right. She said, however, if you were racially ambiguous or you looked white, sometimes we get biracial kids that look very, very white, completely white.
Yeah.
You'll be accepted by white society. White people will accept you. This is what it comes with the black identity thing, is what we look like, all right? People talk about phenotype versus genotype, and it's a very touchy subject. Genotype, meaning your actual genetics, what you truly are. Your genotype could be 100% indigenous African, but your phenotype might resemble a Chinaman for all intents and purposes. Does that make you Chinese? No. You've got no Chinese in you. You're not Asian at all. You're not Mongolian.
Right.
So phenotype is your outward appearance, whereas genotype is your internal genetics, which essentially is what really counts. All right. Now, with Taye Diggs, I understand what Taye Diggs is saying. What Taye Diggs is saying, look, he has a white wife who he loves very much, and his child is a product of both of them. Okay? So he wants that child to be recognized and be seen as this union, this combination of black and white interracial love, which has created this interracial child, this biracial mixed child, and this child should be biracial or mixed, but mixed race, biracial is not a race. And that's the thing. There is no category that have been created because social construct. Yes, we know, but whatever was created, they didn't create this, mixed, intermarriage. They didn't do that. Now, when going back to black as an identity, purists will turn around and say you're not black unless you're 100% black. Okay, if you're not 100% indigenous, then African and 100% Negroid, then you're not black. Now, you need to understand, like I said, race, Negroid, of indigenous Africans. Black is not a race. It's just a word that we associate with the black race, the Negroid race, and anything thereof, that is closely identified to the black, to the Negroid race. You get confused because we're so used to saying black as a race. Okay, we are the only people, as a people of color, whether we're Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Jamaicans, African Americans, and all the other islands that associate with race rather than landmass. When you talk to a Japanese person, excuse me, Mr. Japan, what are you? I'm Japanese. What's your race? I'm Japanese, right? Because remember, Asian is not a race. We always refer to
Right.
the Asian race. It's not a race. It's a huge continent where an Indian person and a Japanese person and a Korean person and a Bangladeshi person look nothing alike. So why have we put them all in this umbrella? They look nothing alike. So they identify with themselves by landmass. Because if I say to you, I'm bringing my Japanese friend, you know what I'm bringing.
Right.
You know what they're going to look like. Landmass, because they haven't really been infiltrated like that. I'm bringing somebody from Pakistan. You know what they're going to look like. I'm bringing somebody from Bangladesh. You know what they're going to look like, etc., etc., etc. I'm bringing somebody from Nigeria. You roughly know what they're going to look like. I'm bringing, the other African countries, you know what they're going to look like. If I say to you, and all these countries associate with landmass. Now, I spoke to a person from Sri Lanka, and I asked him a question. I said, what race are you? And he says, Sri Lankan. I said, that's not a race. He goes, Asian? I said, it's not a race. And he goes, well, to be honest, we know what we look like. We just associate with the country that we're from because we all look like that. I said, all right, when you see a black person, did you call them black? He said, no. So what did you call them? He said, we called them African. Because again, landmass, they assume that this is what Africans look like. When you see a white person, what do you call them? Do you call them white? They said no. In their country, in Sri Lanka, they call them English. Because this is something that's indigenous to it. Things like that. It's what was with landmass. Now,
and that's why I personally prefer the term African, as opposed to black. I mean, I use them interchangeably, but if I have to choose,
our situation is slightly different because we are in the West, in countries that have been colonized. When people say an American, well, I have videos where they say, well, if you don't like it in the United States, you go home. How about you go home? Because this country doesn't belong to you. You're not indigenous to here. The Pilgrims, where were they from? I wonder. Plymouth, in England, right? So if you're a white person who thinks you're purely American, well, you're actually British, all right? So go home, go to the United Kingdom. That's where you're indigenous to. The people that truly own this land, that are indigenous to this land, are brown people. Yes, we can go into whether they were originally from Africa or whatever, but they're the Native Americans. They're, the indigenous people, the Cherokee, the Navajo, the Blackfoot, all of that.
Right.
Now, with colonization, we've changed so much, where you've got Puerto Ricans that are light skinned, dark skinned, brown skinned, the Dominicans, Jamaicans, African Americans. So when I tell you, I'm bringing my American friend, you don't know what he's going to look like.
That can be anything.
It could be anything. So we now have to hold on to that race, because that race now is an identity of what we are. But black, like I said, is a spectrum. Okay, you have to at least be black, to be black. You got to at least have some African. You can't be Rachel Dolezal or go identify.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like, this whole idea of black identity. She basically said, well, I identify as black. I may not be biologically black, but hey, that's what I identify with.
I identify as Batman, but I'm not actually Batman. It doesn't matter. I don't actually have the tools he has. But look,
and a lot of people compare that to the whole situation with transgender people. Like they say, well, I identify as a woman, even though I'm a man biologically.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Whether I will ever see a transgender woman as a true woman or not is irrelevant at this moment, right? Whether I will or not is my business. But when somebody, on a psychological level, there is a certain, psychosemantics that comes with it, and people will say, look, they feel like a woman. They hate the body that they're trapped in. They feel that they're trapped in the wrong body, and it really plays on their mind, and, they can be depressed and also commit suicide. Nobody wanted to commit suicide because they were white or wanted to be black. We saw, you remember the video of a little Brazilian girl, she's crying. And the mother's like, what's wrong? And she's like, I want to be black. And the mother's like, what's wrong? She's like, I want beautiful black skin and thick curly hair. And she's like 4 or 5. You have to type Brazilian girl wishes she was black, right? And her mother's telling her, yes, but you're beautiful too. White skin is beautiful too. She's saying all this.
Maria, o que está acontecendo com você?
Eu quero ser negra.
Você quer ser negra?
Quero.
Por quê?
Porque eu quero.
E por que você quer ser uma negra?
Porque eu acho negra. Porque eu acho pele linda.
Pele branca também é linda.
Eu quero ser negra.
Maria, quando você crescer, você casa com um marido negro E tem monte de filhos negrinhos.
But this little girl is not going to want to commit suicide, or
Right.
there is a huge difference. Now, for one, I do not accept Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner. As a woman, he's still a man. He's still a man, and he also kept his dick. Come on, like, So I don't accept it. Now, Rachel Dolezal made a statement. She said, from a Pan-Africanist standpoint, where Africa is, I don't need to be born in Africa. Africa is born within me. Now, to quote Dr. John Henrik Clarke and Dr. Layla African brothers that are Pan-Africanist brothers, this statement wasn't made for white people. When they say you do not need to be born in Africa, Africa was born within you, they're talking about people of the African diaspora. They're saying, look, you might not be born in Africa, but you have African genetics, and you're from PR, you're from, is it Dr. Benjamin Johansson? Is that his name? What's his name?
Ben Yannicka. I think I know who you're talking about.
He's Puerto Rican. Dark-skinned brother. Puerto Rican. Right? Black man. People didn't know he was Puerto Rican until he died. Because it's a part of his culture that, and his nationality. He's African. He's like, I'm African. That's where the Pan-Africanist view comes from. You don't need to be born in Africa. Africa is born within you. It's within your roots. Right. So she took that when she went on The View. And I said to Wesley, I would have shut you down, lady. I would have shut you down. Because no, you are an indigenous white woman. Okay, you're from the Caucasus Mountains. You're from Europe, and she really is from Europe. Her parents are purely from Europe. All right, so that doesn't come into the same context. There are a lot of people that have a direct, connection and affiliation with the Black culture, or African culture, or Caribbean culture. They're never going to be Caribbean. They're never going to be Black. This is never going to happen to them. All right, and they understand this. You have I don't want to go into the music realm, but you have artists that take on the culture.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of people don't even know rock and roll is Black music. Right? Rock and roll. Yeah. If you think about rock and roll, that was slave slang for having sex. Let's go rock and roll. Then they started making music. Elvis Presley came out and stole songs from these African American Black artists and made it popular. Made it mainstream. He made it mainstream. So when you got Black rock and roll artists that came through, Jimi Hendrix and Lenny Kravitz, people were like, what? A Black rock and roll artist?
Yeah, they made it seem like it was some kind of anomaly.
Rock and roll is Black. Rock and roll is Black. So now it's and that is appropriation. That is a theft, of a culture.
Yeah, I mean, Elvis would literally steal songs,
songs,
and then just repackage it.
And people didn't even know this. They didn't. They just thought, wow, this new rock and roll thing that us whites have created. We didn't create it. Rhythm and blues and whatnot, and jazz. Jazz was a Black art form. It was a purely Black art form. Everything that it went to, but it's like there were people that loved the culture who were not Black. You may get some white guys, put a little bit Dax in their hair, cocoa butter and things like that. They identify with the Black culture, but they're not Black. They're never gonna be Black. Even when you get like rappers, and sometimes you look at a rapper and you're like, I don't know if you're Black or white. If you were just to close your eyes, because the way they're so, they're so in the culture, but they're still white. Rachel Dolezal's thing, what people need to understand is she is clinically insane. All right, she is. She has lost her brain to the point that when you are willing to lie, to the extent that she was willing to lie, when you're willing to totally disown your parents, it's like me. If I was on the other side of the camera with you, me put my arm around and say, "This is my dad." It's just like, this is what she did.
She literally did that.
She did that, and the guy just sitting there, and the guy's sitting there like, I don't know. She said that I think her brother or her foster brother was her son. This is an entire, we're totally going way off track, but now with me, you've got trolls of like, he's like Rachel Dolezal. Well, you'd have to be pretty stupid to think that, because for one, even if I was 100% nationality Puerto Rican, I'd still be Black though, wouldn't I? I still have African genetics. So many people don't even understand, what it is to make a Puerto Rican. When they go, oh, not all Puerto Ricans are black. Look at Ricky Martin. Okay. But you know what? He may not have as much African DNA as, say, Diego Calderon, right? Or Rick Gonzalez, or Zoe Saldana, or Rosario Dawson, right? These are Puerto Ricans. So he may not have as much DNA, but the ones that I'm talking about, that I'm calling black, they're black because you see their hair, you see their face, you see their skin tone. Plus, people need to understand that some of these Puerto Ricans are not, long-time Puerto Ricans. They're like second-generation Puerto Ricans. So when they go, well, my grandfather's from Spain. Well, then you're not a proper Puerto Rican, are you? You're just a Puerto Rican by nationality, So things like that, when people make sense. So even if I was just Puerto Rican, essentially I could be a third black, a third white, and a third indigenous Indian. That's enough to be black, because we're looking at black as a culture, black as a spectrum, black as, black represents the spectrum of your indigenous African race with all mixes, okay? Tay Diggs' son, no matter where he goes, he's going to be a black man before he's going to be a biracial kid. They're going to see a black person first. It doesn't matter what his complexion is. What you need to understand is this. I can walk into any bar that you frequent, any place that you go to, you as a black man, and they will call me their brother. They will look at me, and if they don't know what I am, they'll say biracial, mixed, light skin, he's black, right? I'm home. Can I walk into a white bar and be home? It's never going to happen.
That's a real point. Yeah,
I'm never going to be able to walk into a white bar and they say, this is my brother right here. You got a tan, you got a pearl. Like, it's not going to happen, right? That's not going to happen at all. So,
yeah, I mean, when we think about that, we just have to understand, like, this whole social construct of race really wasn't even created by us. I mean, they defined what was black and what was white.
Yes.
And they set up the one drop rule.
We were the first people. We were the first people on this planet, right? So I want you to think about it. So we're the first people on the planet. All right. Africans, indigenous Africans are the first people on the planet. So we're the originals. They're the originals. Zinjanthropus man, Lucy, all of that, the original. Now, the newcomer walks in. We don't know any. We just know us, right? We know our tribe. We just know this little community that we're in. That's all we know. A newcomer walks in. Who is the newcomer to turn around and say, now the newcomer's white? You're black. But I'm older than you. I'm more established than you. We were here first. Who are you to say that we're darker than you? Who are you to say that we're different? Maybe you're the different one. And this is essentially what happened. The newcomers came and said, you're darker than me, so I'm going to call you black. We're lighter, I'm going to call us white. We're this, we're that. Now, here's the irony of everything. The irony of everything, and I'm going to have to go there. All right. So, they call us monkeys. White anthropologists, official evidence proven that all Caucasians have 5 to 9% Neanderthal DNA. Neanderthal are closely related to which animal?
That monkey.
A monkey. All right. So they have the audacity to call black people monkeys when they all have a minimum of 5 to 9% Neanderthal DNA, which is closely resembled to apes. Now,
yeah, and that reminds me of a point that I saw. I saw this black scientist breaking it down how, like, whites just have more in common with monkeys than black people do.
Yeah.
Because people constantly compare black people to monkeys and apes.
Well,
but he was breaking it down scientifically.
Of course.
And I may include a link in the description box just for people's curiosity.
Look at the whole, okay, so when they say we're all Homo sapiens, indigenous Africans are Homo sapiens. They are 100% Homo sapien. And I always have to say white anthropologists say this, because the moment you say a white person said it, that must be
everybody
true.
believes it.
That must be true. Let me be a white man talking something now. They're like, the white man said it. You know it's real when white people say it. So all of a sudden, look, they dictate that there was 2 species. Right? I love this when I talk about race and then white people say, we're all the same race, we're all the human race. I'm like, well, humans actually a species and races are subcategories of those species. All right, so get it right. There was Homo sapiens. Then there was Neanderthal. Neanderthals were the white species, and Homo sapiens with the dark black species. Okay, Homo sapiens intermarried with the Neanderthals and created, the Caucasian race. Okay, and obviously it goes down, and it's watered down until now they have very, very little, Neanderthal DNA, but 5 to 9% is still a lot. Now, so are we the same species? No, we're not. This is why you talk about there are some brothers that say white people need to pay homage for their creator, i.e. the black woman is God. Things like this, or God is within Africa, because without God, you would not be yourself. You would not even be white. All right. And if you're not going to pay homage to the human God, then you need to pay homage to the other 5 to 9%. But you don't want to pay homage to the Neanderthal DNA, because you tried to say that we're the Neanderthals, but science has said that you are in fact the Neanderthals. So pay homage to God. But as we know, with white supremacy, you always want to take and steal things. So when they steal it, they say, no, we're the humans and you're the monkeys. But your own scientists are telling you, actually, no, that's not necessarily true. Okay? So, and I don't...
It kind of reminds me of like Planet of the Apes, like where the apes are running things and the humans are the ones that are oppressed and
the ones
they have
the slaves.
Backwards, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So when you look at, obviously, like people from the Caribbean, people from African American, we do have white DNA in us. We do have white. Some of us have very little amount in it. Some of us have a lot. Okay. Do some of us have Neanderthal DNA? We probably do. It's going to be a lot less than your, a lot less than your full Caucasian, full European person. Now, the thing, I know we went totally off track, but with the whole light skin and dark skin thing, is colonialism is a wonderful tool. Religion, gotta love religion. Religion, colonialism, politics, pure evil. All right, because they go hand in hand together into controlling people and brainwashing people. I watched a video about Cape Verdeans. So you've got these Cape Verdeans in school. They're dark skinned, and they're talking to them. She goes, "I'm dark skinned, but I'm not black. I'm Cape Verdean. I got Portuguese blood." She's dark.
Even though I'm dark skinned, like, I'm not black. I'm Dominican and Cape Verdean, and black people get on my damn nerves. I'm not even joking, because you know what? They're mad ignorant. Like, that's very true. They are very ignorant people. Like, they do not care about nothing but themselves. They're selfish. They're ignorant. And I would never date a black boy. I would never have a black girlfriend because they got that bad hair. Both of them. And, it's not me just being, this is not me being racist. This is me being real. Because, we have him right there and then him right there. He's on a Toshiba. When my little white homeboy is going to be on the Mac trying to make a song with me, trying to get me rich, like, not trying to be about something that's corny in the library at school. And I didn't mean to rash on them personally, but I'm just saying, I'm just pointing something out.
No hard feelings.
Yeah, no hard feelings at all. Yes to Irving, because that nigga is the definition of a
piece of shit.
Yeah. But anyways, I like black people, but I don't really have that many black friends. I don't really like to make black friends. They're not anybody that I look to be my friend. Right. I don't really know what else to say, but yeah, I don't get along with black girls that much, like, unless they're nice, because they're usually not nice. They have nasty attitudes and stuff, Yeah.
We're fucking furry kids.
Black people stress me out. That's why I don't like them. They stress me out. They got the craziest problems. No, that's true. You're laughing, but that's true. Like, every black friend that I have, they come up to me, my cousins, brothers, uncles, mother, sister, that nigga. I be like,
I got
girl,
my cousin's brother's cousin.
Right. And I just be sitting there like, I do not have these kinds of problems, and I don't need these kinds of problems. Therefore, I don't need black friends. That's it. And I don't even have to say no more, because I'm done.
And they're going around and be like, nah, we're not black. We're Cape Verdean. We're Portuguese. We got Portuguese blood. Cape Verde is an island off the coast of Africa, which was colonized by the Portuguese. You speak Portuguese. You're not Portuguese. You were colonized by the Portuguese. You're not Portuguese. You get this whole, the light skin thing, the dark skin thing. When we spoke, you said Willie Lynch. Now, here's the thing. People left it for Willie Lynch. It's not true. It doesn't exist. It doesn't matter. The concept is true. The concept is true, okay? Because it did happen.
I think that's like the important point here. Like this whole thing of black skin versus light skin and all that kind of stuff. We have to look at the root source of the problem, and that's the white man and slavery and colonialism, the whole divisions that we have as a people, where you even have like African Americans against people from Jamaica or from Trinidad, or you have Africans against, for instance, in one of those islands where I think it's Haiti and
Haiti and Dominican Republic.
Yeah, the Dominican Republic, like the tensions between those two people, those two groups of people, how you have, one side saying, well, we don't like you, we hate you, and then the other side having the same type of attitude. All of this is a part of divide and conquer.
Especially within the so-called Latino speaking islands in the Caribbean, there's almost like this unspoken, don't speak about it, it doesn't exist racism, where they will tell you that they're not racist. There's no racism on the islands. There's no color. It's not racism. It's colorism. Okay. There's no colorism because we're all one people. We're Puerto Rican. We're Dominican. You guys talk about race, white, black, white. We're just Puerto Rican. We're Dominican. We are this perfection that was created by these three races, right? But yet you have a problem with darker skinned Puerto Ricans or darker skinned Dominicans. You have a problem with more African features, to the point where I have heard Puerto Rican women on my mom's side of the family say, to their daughters, because their daughters are darker, you better get you somebody who's lighter, because you don't want to get any darker, or don't be in the sun, things like that. Now, Haiti, Dominican Republic is crazy. It's almost like in South Africa, this beef that we talk about, the black versus colored, things like that. We need, and it's the same thing. It's even like, it's just this perfection where, the slave master, we need to be as close to the slave master as possible. Religion was used to control us, where in the book, How to Control the Negro, it says you must create an identification with divinity as being white. So what we do is we state that all of the apostles, all of the prophets, all of the angels, God is white, pure white. So what they see is they look at the master and see the master is the closest thing to perfection, closest thing to God. So they respect you. So they use that. So now you've got black people that go, well, yeah, the white is perfection, this and that. So I want to be like that. I want to be as close to that as possible. Now, when you talk about religion in the sense that they go, oh yeah, we know that Jesus was black, or he wasn't white, he was Middle Eastern, or Asian, or whatever, right? Black people have this way of saying that he's black. We know he's black. You try to put a black Jesus in one of those black churches up on the wall, they won't accept it.
Yeah, black most people, of them won't. There are a few churches that have black images, but a lot of churches they have that white image of Jesus. And frankly, even people who are conscious and have black consciousness and understanding, if they close their eyes and they're told to look at, imagine Jesus, that white image is going to come up, because we've been so thoroughly programmed with that.
We were born and raised to believe something. If I say to you, okay, my son that comes into the world, and I tell my son every single day that this is green. So this color is green for the rest of his life. He's not going to be able to comprehend that this is black, because all he's heard is that this is green. People told you that this is the right religion. People told you Jesus was this color. People told you that this is the true religion. So you took it on and said, yes, that's what it is. You don't know how to accept anything. I feel that I'm conscious. I feel that I'm spiritual. I totally moved away from religion. I had so many questions. How the hell is John the Baptist black? He's clearly stated as black in the Bible, and it states that he is the cousin of Jesus, right? So why is Jesus not black? Because he's not. Oh, okay, Padre, that makes sense. In a world at a time when they didn't mix and they didn't really move far, or all I was told was this, and it never made any sense to me. Now, when I started to do more reading, Professor Joseph Atwell talks about Christianity being created by the Romans as a way to pacify the Jews by creating this Jewish character who essentially said, turn the other cheek and obey your master. All right. And that got them to actually pay taxes. The whole, timeline of the Bible is identical to the conquest of Emperor Constantine. But yet the only character that can't be found is Jesus. We haven't found him. There's no real evidence of him. So as I became more conscious and did more research on my spirituality, certain little things that came into play was certain brothers would say to me, oh, you need to pray to your ancestors. You need to do certain rituals. I couldn't do it. I've been so indoctrinated for so many years that even though I know that that's probably the right thing, it just seems weird to me. It seems awkward to me. You know, and this is where I'm getting, no matter how conscious and spiritual you think you are, it's like, okay, you've got a flock of sheep that are blind and controlled. Now you as a sheep who are open your eyes and become conscious, you know, and spiritual have moved away from that flock. You've moved away, but you're still lost because you don't truly know what the truth is. Because my mother and my father weren't there in the beginning telling me, you need to pray to your ancestors. You need to do these rituals. You need to do this. You need to talk to an Arishi priestess. You need to do this. We don't know this because this was stolen from us. You know, when you take a baby from her mother's, from his or her mother's arms and take that baby and give it to, to somebody who knows nothing, whether that person be white or another person who was black but has been taken from their mother's arms, and they can only teach what the master has told them. Well, this is now facts. This is now the truth. This is now our culture. So you've with this, the Hispanic side is that this is what they believe now. Okay, so much so that you don't realize the food you eat, African. The dance, the music you dance to, the drums, African. Your styles, African. That incredible, beautiful body shape that everybody loves and adores from Puerto Ricans, African. Those features, African. Yes, you're light skinned, but you're African. Your roots are from Africa. And I say it all the time. What did Malcolm X say? A cat can give birth in an oven. It's not going to give birth to cookies. Your roots are your roots regardless. You've got this whole thing with you've got some belief system that state you are whatever your father is. Then another belief system, you are whatever your mother is, because you were born in that womb. So if your mother's black, you're black. If your father's black, you're black. So many different ideologies, so many different belief systems. Like, I don't know, what am I? Things like, because the Hebrew Israelites state that because my father is Jamaican, I'm Benjamin, whereas my mother is Ephraim, but I'm not Ephraim because I'm what my father is. Stuff like that. The Hebrew Israelite, it's a great ideology, but it has a lot of flaws, and that's another conversation for another.
Yeah, we can do a whole video about that.
Trust me. But again, it's hard to even touch on the light skin versus dark skin subject without touching on colonialism, without touching on the effects of slavery today, without touching on exactly what it is they did to us in the brainwashing. Because you know what? When have you seen Sankofa?
Yes, I saw that years ago.
Excellent movie for this topic, right? Yeah. Especially the light skin thing. His mother was black. His father was raped his mother. He was a slave master who raped his mother, and she gave birth to this blonde, afro-haired, strong, light-skinned brother with green eyes.
Right.
He was real light, and she obviously saw him, and he became an overseer. He would do the whipping and stuff like that because he was light-skinned, green eyes. Still a slave though. Still a slave. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know what. It was so much confusion.
Yeah, that's the profound thing about it. Like the fact, even though
that movie was incredible.
Light, even though he's light and all that stuff, at the end of the day, he's just a slave like everybody else.
Exactly.
Even though he's the slave master's own son.
Yeah, the slave master's own son, and overseer, but was still treated like a slave. And they told, they would tell him, the slave master would tell, when he went into the church, they would say, you're not like the other slaves. You're different. The slaves are demonic. They made him believe that his black mother was demonic. That she was the devil, and that he was slightly different. Okay, to the point that he hated his black side, the black part of him. But the slaves, look at the beauty of the slaves. The dark-skinned slaves knew he was black. Do you know what they said? I think there's a part when his mother says to him, she said, you think because you're light, you're not black? You're still black. You think because I was raped by a white man that you're white, you're black. She said, I am your mother. I am Africa. You are African before you will ever be anything. And that is what we need to really take home. And then in the movie, and people need to watch that movie. But it's he ended up killing his mother. Remember, he ended up killing his mother because he lost his mind. He killed his mother. And in the end, he took her back. When he realized what he did, he took her back to the church and he put it down on the altar. And the priest was like, "What are you doing? Take that off there now. This is the house of God." And he turned around and said, "She is more holy and more spiritual than any of you devils have ever been. She deserves to be in the house of God more than any of you people." And when you understand, like, just watching certain things that will really open your eyes. Watch Goodbye Uncle Tom, which shows you the breeding, the breeding camps, the stud farms, the mare farms, the whitening camps, what they did on a sexual level to us. Even when they talked about, what did they say? Symbiosis. When they said that the slaves are getting lighter because it's kind of like chameleons. The longer they stay with people, that they'll become white. No, you were sleeping and raping the slave women. That's why. But your women were too stupid to understand what was going on. Okay, now this, when you understand what that happens, and it is, of course, there was a slight difference in treatment back then. There was a slight difference in treatment. Okay, whether Willie Lynch said, "Look, you have to pit the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves and make them feel that they're inferior," and just like that. And that, whether it's true or not, that's happening today. All right, because what's the movie? Menace to Society. When Kane robs the light-skinned dude for the rims, and the light-skinned dude says, "Come on, man, ain't we brothers?" Right? You remember those? "Come on, man, ain't we brothers?" And Kane looks at him and he's like, "Shut the hell up." You know what I'm saying? Because you ain't my brother. We lost that unity. We have lost that unity. When we were my father used to say that we were better as a community when we were segregated. The so-called Hispanic community, the West Indians, the Jamaicans, the African Americans had this unity. We were black. We weren't white. It didn't matter about race. We had to buy black. We had to teach black. We were our own community. We looked after each other. We dealt with things first with us, right? This black on black violence wasn't happening. Okay, the black on black crime, the gangs weren't happening. The Latin Kings, the Bloods, the Crips, all of these original gangs were set for a reason, to protect each other and have a unity and a family. But the gangs went left and became, a gang within each other and started attacking each other. The moment they said 1964, 1965, boom, segregation's over. You can all, okay, we accept it now. But then you had, and we lost that whole unity that we had, that love that we had, that structure we had, and we've lost our unity.
I think even back in the day, I mean, you still had a big problem with colorism. You had the whole paper bag test.
The brown paper bag test.
But you actually had like fraternities and sororities that wouldn't accept people based on their complexion. Like if they were too dark, they couldn't join X fraternity or Y sorority or whatever. So you've always had that colorism that goes back to slavery. But I mean, we still have that problem today.
Yeah, I just personally think it's gotten worse. And this is from talking to like grandparents, family members who are older than me or something. Yeah, it's gotten worse. They believe it's gotten worse because, I see memes. The memes are, I learned so much from social media. I was like, I don't even have to watch the news anymore. Oh, this happened. Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah, after I saw your video where you mentioned these photographs and the memes, I did a search online. I searched both like light skin memes and dark skin memes. Yeah. It's just like outrageous how prolific that stuff is everywhere.
Exactly. And it fuels a certain hatred. Now I made a video when I said that I asked the question. I said, do dark skinned women and light skinned men share the same enemy or the same struggle?
Right. Yeah.
The reason I said that is some people didn't understand it, but the reason I said it was to say, look, some the men who seem to attack black women or dark-skinned black women, would we be in agreement that they're normally dark-skinned themselves? Yeah? Okay. The same men that seem to attack dark-skinned black women also seem to attack and hate light-skinned black men. So this was what that statement was about when I say that we share the same enemy. There are light-skinned women and mixed women, mixed black women that have been attacked by dark-skinned women, whether it be, in the same way that I was attacked by some dark-skinned brothers, and there are obviously, and vice versa. There are light-skinned girls, in school and things like that were attacked. All of these things do happen. And I've had, the most idiotic statement somebody left on one of my videos on Facebook was like, excuse my language, but this nigga's not black. He's technically light skinned. Okay. Nigga, black, light skinned.
Yeah.
When you're putting those words into the dictionary and looking at synonymous, definitions, and they all light skin. Light skin is a word. Light skinned, are words used to explain and describe a black person's complexion. Nigga, a derogatory term used to describe a person of African descent. Black, an incorrect, acceptable term for the race, Negroid race. So essentially, you're saying this black's not black, he's technically black. That's what you're saying. And that's what I mean, where like we have this stupidity. And like I said, you have the purists that say, well, you're not black if you're not 100% black or if you're not dark skinned. And you're like, oh, okay, well, you need to start sitting in the back of the bus again, since Rosa Parks was light skinned, okay? And you need to, no longer have your freedom and civil rights or anything like that because of, Hewitt P. Newton was light skinned. My brother Malcolm X was light skinned. You can only go with, Marcus. You can only represent what Marcus Garvey got for you, and you can only work with what Martin Luther King got for you. I'm gonna stick with what my light skinned black brothers got for me because they did it for me, and and the dark skinned brothers. No, they didn't do that. Black was for black, like regardless. When they fought, they are turning in their grave right now. They're like, yeah, fight for you to just be light skinned versus dark skinned. I didn't fight for that. I don't see anybody being better than me because they're darker, or me being better than anybody because I'm lighter. I don't see that. I truly do see us as black. Whether you're, this is what you need to understand. Whether you're half black, I'm not the type. I'm not. Oh, if you're an eighth black, you're black. No, I don't. No, there is a stage when I go, all right, yeah, whatever you want to identify as, But if you're half black, if you're 3/4 black, if you're mixed a little bit, if you're black and Chinese, you're black. Yes, you are. I am black. I am a mixed black man. I am clearly mixed.
Yeah. So this has been like a great discussion. Like we can conclude by talking about like solutions. What do you see as the solution to this colorism problem? Since it's been going on forever, it seems like from slavery until today. How can we address this problem? Move beyond it.
Colorism was started, perpetuated by white people, by the slave masters, but it lives on because of us. Right? Knowledge itself is an incredible thing. Like once you start to read and learn and really understand what's going on, because right now white people aren't the ones going, oh, you're light skin, you're dark skin better. Like, they might be, but it's us doing it. Okay, white people are sitting there, you're black to me, but we need to truly understand unity and understand how important our numbers are as a unit and what we can do. The other day I was talking to a friend of mine about I want to do this thing which is about unifying gangs, where the gangs in Chicago, the gangs in New York, the gangs in LA have got their issues where they're fighting against each other. And yet, remember I've said this to you before, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. If your enemy is the police and the police are killing you off, right? And we're here killing each other. We're destroying each other. The police are sitting there going, you know what? I'm going to let you kill him and kill him and kill him, and then we'll just come and pick off the pieces as we need to. You, by killing each other, are essentially working for the police. By saying, yeah, they're over there, you're snitching to the police. By saying, they're, killing them and having, no. They're killing us, and we're killing us. We're making it very easy to commit genocide, to cause this genocide. It's very, very easy. So, what I want to do is to awaken a couple minds of whether this can be done with the help of other people. This is something I'm working on right now. I'm speaking to people about doing it. And it's about understanding that we need to unite and understand, our common enemy. And that they're not going to respect us until we respect ourselves. Because whenever black people are killed or murdered, and I'm going off, but I'm going to bring it back. Whenever black people are murdered by police, the first argument is, well, you guys kill each other.
Exactly.
What about black on black violence? So we need to actually address that to a point where we're saying, all right, let's not give them a reason. Right? However they do that, whether it's a truce within the community, that's one thing. And that leads on to the whole, the light skin, dark skin things. We need to understand we are black and we are fighting a common cause. And that what we're doing is this. We are being oppressed and we're being destroyed by, racism, by other, by white people that hate us. Not all white people are racist, but still, by white people that hate us, by systematic racism, oppression, and at the same time, we're fighting ourselves. And they're laughing at us. Look at them. They laugh because his hair is more curly than his. They beat each other up because he's a bit lighter than him. Like, white people are not going, I'm going to beat you up because you got freckles. I'm not, I'm going to hate you because your hair is blonde and my hair is light brown. They're not doing that. Right. We need to understand that we have so many enemies that we need to unite within ourselves. When you look at the American census, the U.S. Census, it makes you believe that there were this much white people, this much African Americans, this much Hispanics. Okay. The American Census state dictates that anybody from North Africa and the Middle East is classified as white because their ancestry is so diverse that it would make no sense to actually categorize them as a race. So you put them in a white category. But that doesn't make sense. So if these people are indigenous African blood, but they've got some Arab blood and, some European blood, you're going to just call them white. Okay. The reason that they call them white is, and they put them in that white category, Egyptians white, Algerians white, Moroccans white in the U.S. Census, is because these countries identify with religion before they identify with race. It goes religion, culture, nationality, and then race. They identify as Muslims, then they identify as Arabs, the culture, then they identify as their nationality, Algerian, Moroccan, Egyptian, Tunisian, Sudan, things like that. Then they'll think about race, but by then it's too late. So they're using a group of people that don't care what you identify them as race to bulk up their numbers, to make us feel that we are a tiny little community. Then you've got the so-called Hispanics. How can Hispanic be a category for race in this racial structure when it's not a race? So you've got these Hispanic, well, I'm Hispanic, but you're black. Some of you are still black. Now, let's say we take those North Africans and stick them in the black, in the black category in the U.S. Census. Take the Afro-Latinos and stick them in the black category. All of a sudden, our numbers are looking kind of strong and healthy. And the white race numbers is looking kind of weak. But they want you to feel that we are a minority. They talk about us as the minority when in fact we're the majority. We're just unaware of who we are. And even the light skin thing is that we need to understand the light skin, dark skin, we need to understand our power as a one people. And that we need to unify and stop doing this bullshit and just be black. Okay? Right. And just, this is what the activists fought for, right? When they fought for us to be called black, right? That's what or do you want to live in a world, do you want to live like South Africa, colored versus black? Because that's what is essentially could happen, and believe me, it's not nice. Light skin, dark skin, we're black. We need to unite. It's just, we look like each other. Some of us look a little different, but we look essentially like each other. It's about trying to give back as much as we can to our community and using the platforms that we do have for good. Peace, love, and coconut oil.
Hey man, that's racist. Please remember that from now on, brand new never before seen videos, as well as live streams, will only be available on my website, ikyg.com, via a Patreon subscription. ikyg.com is a Black-owned, Black-ran platform, 100% free from censorship. It's the only place where we don't have to worry about what we say and expressing ourselves. Make sure you check out the description and the comment section for important links, as well as information in video form that shows you what benefits you get when you support the site and join my Patreon. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, then don't forget to subscribe and be notified every time I upload a video. For exclusive content and perks, check out my Patreon. This is where we have private live streams, group chats, live Q&As, live phone calls, and open topics. This is a safe space where you can interact with other like-minded people, make friends, send each other direct private messages, and so much more without any trolls. And yes, you get to use GIFs and images in the live chats. So what are you waiting for? This is a completely independent website, free from censorship. If you'd like to make a donation towards the site so we can continue to put out the truth without fear of being silenced, then please hit that donation button. It's greatly appreciated. Check out the rest of the site for videos, private and public live streams, find out all the tea, and make sure to utilize the Black Money section of the website. Advertise your business absolutely free to people that look like you, free forever. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at angel_IKYG.